And I was like, this is the greatest feeling of my life. My life changed dramatically afterwards. And every time I burp these days, I'm like, I always ask my wife, was that a big one? Was that like loud? Did you hear it across the room? And if you did, it's a good thing because I'm happy. I was happy, like knowing that I can burp again. That sense of relief in my body was just, I could feel it. And me talking about it, I'm actually tingling right now. The idea of just being able to burp, the sense of relief just is just so awesome.
I have a fact for you that you may have never really thought of. On average, people burp. Yes, burp. An average of about 10 to 20 times a day, according to some quick research I did online. Burping is natural, and it's a way to let out excess air. But what happens when you can't burp? Like, ever? What does that feel like? People who can't burp, well, they build up all that excess air in their stomach and esophagus, leading to a range of symptoms, usually including loud gurgling noises in the neck and chest, bloating, and discomfort in the neck, chest, and abdomen. Now, you may be thinking, well, this isn't a big deal. And well, that's because you can burp. All day, we take in air, and it slowly releases. But for my guest, that just wasn't possible. Facing a condition that few understood can be increasingly isolating. Now imagine living with something as unusual as no-burp syndrome, where a simple burp just isn't possible. Its official name, R-CPD, was discovered in 2019, yet many people live and lived with this condition. Hey, Tim here, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Invisible Condition podcast, where we talk about advocacy and unusually normal things, the conditions, diseases, and illnesses we live with. We will end the stigma of invisible disabilities by empowering voices, and today's voice is brought to us by Henry, a friend and a father who has faced this unique challenge of living with R-CPD, commonly known as no-burp syndrome. Henry talked with numerous doctors who dismissed him, yet this syndrome was having a huge impact on his quality of life. What's cool about Henry's story is he just didn't stop when a doctor said no or I don't believe you. He went online, did an incredible amount of research, printed that off, went to his doctors, and it's a story of perseverance and self-advocacy. He did not take that no for an answer. And he joined me and just talked about that discovery, finding that online forum, taking that to his doctor, and then getting a procedure that has now allowed him to burp. If you've ever felt alone in your struggle with an invisible disability, or perhaps you're just looking for some inspiration on how to advocate for yourself, you've got to listen to this one. And I bet at the end of this episode, you'll not take burping for granted again. Have a listen. Henry, I'm just excited that you're on the show. You know, we've developed a friendship over the years. And so I just thank you for coming on. And I know you've got such a interesting story. It's a compelling story. But before we get into that, I'm grateful that you're here with me today.
And thanks for having me. Honestly, I think it's really great that you've built this platform, Invisible Condition, to have the opportunity to share other people's story. And, I'm just delighted to be here to be able to share mine.
Yeah. And that's what it's about. I created this platform as a space for myself to share. And then I found out very quickly that others wanted to share their story as well. And that's really the nature of Invisible Condition, is just to allow others to share their story so we can end the stigma of invisible conditions, those invisible disabilities that we can't see. And I remember, I think we were probably standing on the playground while our kids were playing, and I was sharing a little bit about what I do. And you said, hey, I have a story to tell you about a condition that I live with. And so I'm not going to steal your thunder. I would love for you to just spend some time with us, sharing a bit about what you live with, your diagnosis, and the journey you've gone on just to even get treatment.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So my condition, it's such a funny, interesting thing. Like every time I tell somebody, yeah, I can't burp, they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean you can't burp? Can you just drink, some Coke? or some Pepsi or whatever it may be, and you just let it out, right? I'm like, you know what? I've never done that before. I've never experienced it. I don't even know what it is. But all I know is that through my life, even as a toddler or 3 or 4 years, as early as I can have memory, I just could never burp. I'd be jealous of my friends being able to burp, and it was never really a thing that mattered to me, though. I mean, who cares? Why would you want to burp, right? It just seems so disgusting or whatever it may be. But as I got older, my social life changed a little bit. I realized this what we call no-burp syndrome, or the more official name is called retrograde. I'm gonna probably like screw this up. It's retrograde cryptopharyngeal dysfunction, uh, R-CPD for short. I'm gonna call it no-burp syndrome for today. Um, it really becomes a problem as you get older because as your social life changes, we go out to bars, we stay out at night, hang out with our friends. People don't notice, but and probably take it for granted is that we're always swallowing air, whether it's through the food we drink, whether it's just walking down the street and you're just you're breathing. We're always swallowing air, but it always comes back out. Just whether it just kind of seeps out or you burp. But for somebody like me, for 37 years of my life, I can't burp that air back out. And what happens is from morning, I'm pretty empty in terms of oxygen in my body, gases, and then at the end of the day, I'm just like a balloon because it just builds up throughout the day, and I start getting cramps. I don't feel like eating, it always has to come out the other way, and that's kind of embarrassing too, right? So being out with your friends, you're at a bar, like, okay, I got to step away for a minute, boys. And I just got to let it out, right? So, yeah, it's been such an interesting syndrome that I've had. Don't really talk about it. Nobody knows much about it. I talked to my doctor about it, and he's like, "Oh no, it's an intestinal thing. You definitely have no problem." And it just becomes a nuisance once you get older. And I think, especially when I started doing more cycling, more jogging, which requires me to run against the wind or ride against the wind, I'm swallowing even more air. That buildup becomes more painful. And not until one day I went online and actually Googled it, not able to burp. I found this Reddit group called the No-Burpers. And I was like, wow, these people actually experience the same thing. There's more people out there that are like me, that suffer from the same problem. And that's where I was able to self-diagnose myself with R-CPD, no burp syndrome. And then from there, I started my journey of trying to figure out how do I resolve this. And it was quite the journey. It was a several-year process. But happy to say today, was able to get the treatment I needed, not without challenges. And I'm fully, I guess, so to speak, recovered from this for over, I guess, 10 months now. So it's been really great.
I can't imagine, it's just something we take for granted, right? When, if we drink some carbonated water or a drink or whatever, ingest that food, it's that it leaves our body in some way. And I can imagine, as like you said, as you got older, you started to impact your life, not just from a social perspective, but also your physical activity. I know you. You're a fit guy. You're a runner. You're a cyclist, and it started to have a big impact on your life. And so talk to us a little bit about that. Just, when did you start to notice a real impact on your life and then say, hey, there's something going on here, or I need to figure out what's happening?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I do feel our CPD, most people are usually born with it, but what happens as you get older, it actually becomes bigger and bigger of a problem, whether it's our digestive system changing, or, our intestines, or my body just can't really cope with that extra gas in my stomach. And I get crazy amounts of pain. It's not the same pain I had when I was 8 or 9 dealing with this condition, or 15. As I got older, now that I'm in my late 30s, the pain is much greater. And I think someone who works really hard, right, throughout the day, and finally get off work, hang out with the kids, be able to go for a jog or go for a cycling ride to relieve stress or whatever it may be, and not being able to do that because of this pain in my stomach, it just became such a big downer, right? And I had many personal goals to do cycling races, one being the Grand Fondo in Whistler, Canada, And I just couldn't train for it. I tried my best. I spent my weekends training every day, but as I, try to ride more and more or train more, it just started to be very, very painful. So I think from a um, you know activity perspective, it certainly limited me in my ability to do things I want to do. The pain that I had to deal with throughout the day, certainly that made a very negative impact in my kind of my personal life, my quality of life, and just not being able to drink when I want to drink. Right? Let's say I have my first beer, that feels pretty bad after that, and get a lot of buildup. Second, third beer, I'm toast. It's the end of me for that day, right? And I start feeling some really bad pain, and usually I'm the first one who leaves the party because of that, right? And people always kind of make fun of me jokingly, but I'm known as that guy who just can only have one beer, right? I'm also Asian too, so that also has a little impact on that as well. So, but in short, like it's been definitely a downer, and then as I get older, I'm more aware of my body. I'm more aware of my time of being able to do things, and when something as a health condition kind of takes that away, it's very meaningful for me. It's something that I feel like as I get older, it's important for me to try to resolve. When you're young, you have a lot of time. You can do whatever you want. If you're not feeling well for a day, you have the next day. But as you get older, it's like every day matters more, right? And that's why I sought out to really try to figure this out.
Yeah, I can relate to that. So when cycling, for you as well, is just for me with Crohn's, it took cycling away from me. I just couldn't do it. Just didn't have that energy, and so I'm trying to imagine what it would feel like from your perspective, and just not from just the physical side, but also the mental side of like, why can't I do this? And then
Mm-hmm.
now you understand why you couldn't, right? Even though, like you said, your friends were jokingly saying, hey, you're always the first one to leave the party, or the first, so you're only allowed, you can only drink one beer, or whatever that is. I can imagine it still plays on your mind a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. I was with my friends out maybe Friday of last week. And they remember that. They remember that of me. I hadn't seen them in like 5 years, and they're like, "Oh, Henry can only drink one." Now I'm jokingly saying, "Well, now I can drink a grand total of two until something else kicks in, such as my inability to break down, alcohol in my body." So yeah, it does make a big impact, right? And I think the fact that it made such a big impact, I really pushed hard to try to figure out how to resolve this, right? So kind of in that latter journey of trying to figure out what's wrong with me, how do I deal with this, how do I fix this? I started going to see my family doctor a little bit more. The funny thing about this no burp syndrome, it's not really well known, and we're not even talking about just the general public. But even in the medical world, this condition was not even considered an official condition, I think, up until 2019. We're in 2024 right now. That's only 5 years ago. So as you can imagine, a lot of the doctors out there, even if they've heard of this condition, and many have not, um, they may not actually know how to treat it. And even if they know how to treat it or what kind of treatments you can take, they may not even know if it's something that's they can't evaluate that because they're not they're it's just so unknown, right? Um, my family doctor basically said, "Yeah, I've heard of it." He googled it afterwards, and then he said, "Yeah, like you can take a Botox shot, which is actually the primary first line of treatment for this the syndrome." And he quickly said, "Well, you shouldn't do it though, because Botox only lasts for several months." The moment I said, "Oh, go on," I went on Reddit. I've done a lot of research. Folks who have done a Botox shot, it tends to work forever because what happens is their minds get trained that their muscle, the Botox that relaxes the muscle that enables us to burp. There's a special muscle that we all have. Mine is just more closed off, right? And in order to burp, you have to relax it. I lack the ability to relax that muscle, and that's where the Botox shot comes in, right? So the doctor saying, well, the Botox shots usually wear off after 6 months. It's not worth getting, and because you will have this problem again. You can't just keep getting the shots. But what I'm hearing online is that even though it wears off, your mind retrains itself to be able to notice, to be aware of that muscle, and now therefore you can at least control it a certain amount enough to be able to burp. So he didn't believe it. I sought out it was enough of a problem for me to seek out additional advice. So I ended up going to another kind of walking clinic, now my family doctor. And she basically said, you know what, I've never heard of this before, but I'm going to set you up with a specialist. And it was an ENT specialist. I actually went through several ENTs because not all ENTs wanted to treat this condition. Long story short, like 6 months later, 7 months later, I finally got booked into getting the shot that I needed to relieve this muscle. Went to the hospital. They put me to kind of under the anesthesia. I was able to kind of get the best sleep of my life. They it was actually the best sleep of my life. They injected me, and I would say probably like 3 or 4 weeks later, I did my first real burp, and I was like, this is the greatest feeling of my life. My life changed dramatically afterwards. And every time I burp these days, I'm like, I always ask my wife, was that a big one? Was that like loud? Did you hear it across the room? And if you did, it's a good thing because I'm happy. I was happy, like knowing that I can burp again. That sense of relief in my body was just, I could feel it. And me talking about it, I'm actually tingling right now. The idea of just being able to burp, the sense of relief just is just so awesome.
It's something as we grow up as kids. I remember with friends just having burping contests and just taking that for granted, just taking it as like this is just something everybody does. But one of the main points is we can't take it for granted. We can't take what seems to be quote unquote normal in my life might not be normal in somebody else's life. And, you've got a supportive network and supportive friends and family and workplace. And here you are now sharing your story just to say, hey, like, look, I had this syndrome. I have this syndrome. But I want to back it up a little bit because your story of advocacy is something that, man, I just love. I know enough about you to know, Henry, that when you get an idea, you just research it. Am I wrong in saying that? You're like, you go to Google, you're going to AI, you're going to spend time just researching something. And
Yeah.
And you brought that to your doctor. Your doctor was like, no, we're not going to do that injection. And I know people who would stop there, who would say, you know what, I guess my doctor says no, so I'm not going to. But you didn't take no for an answer. Why? Why didn't you just say, okay, I guess this is as good as it gets?
Yeah, I think for myself several things, right? So one, it became such a big problem for me. I wanted to get it fixed. Life is too important. I want to live out my life healthy, happy, unrestricted, and just being able to be able to do what I want, which is be able to have a drink or two, maybe three, go out for a bike ride and not feel like my tummy's going to explode by the end of it, and have to tell everybody my excuse of my stomach hurts, and everybody's like, oh, it's sure, that's just an excuse, right? But no, really, my tummy does hurt. So I think just knowing that if it hurts enough, if it's enough of a bother in life, like it makes sense to advocate for yourself, right? The other thing too, and most people know me as somebody who my inner circle would know me as somebody who's like, yeah, I research, I do a lot of research, I do a lot of reading, whether it's Google, right, whether it's inquiring a large language model, some kind of generative AI tool, or simply just reading, right? And um, sometimes there's some negative stigma to that, like, oh, you're Googling your way, trying to find your own treatment. The doctor is always going to know better. Well, the doctor does know for the most part better, but they don't know who you are. They know medicine. They've studied it, and I respect them for that. But we know our bodies the most, right? We listen to ourselves. We are ourselves, and if we feel something and it's painful, we should feel strongly with that, right? And we should advocate for ourselves, right? It means education, right? So informing yourself to figure out what is the problem we're dealing with, what kind of potential condition it is, and how do we remediate that. And some folks will go to me and say, "Oh, Henry, you're just Googling, you're not a doctor." Well, I'm informing myself, right? And I'll bring that information to the doctor, and we will consult and we will deliberate, right? And sometimes, usually, more often times, the doctor's usually right. But when we know they're wrong, and I feel like they're wrong for a very logical reason, I'm going to advocate for myself. And in this case, I did. And so, um, I think it was important of a feeling and problem that I had, that I'm just like, you know what, I'm not gonna. I value my life. I value my health. I'm gonna get to the bottom of this, right? And even if, in my opinion, like when a doctor said, well, it's only going to last 6 months, but that's 6 months of feeling great. I think it's worth it. Why, even if it had to cost me money, and of course the government paid for it, but even if it cost me money, it cost me time and effort, and it put some strain on the healthcare, it's still worth it. Right? I think that's what the healthcare system's for. So I'm glad I did advocate, and I think for all those out there, like whether it is no-burp syndrome or it's some other kind of medical condition where you're not feeling too great about it, like I would never feel bad about informing yourself, right? When somebody says you're googling too much about, don't try to be your own doctor. I think that's probably the worst, you know, thing to say to somebody because maybe they should. It's like telling them not to learn, no, not to advocate for yourself. I think that's a big no, right? So there is a situation where you can spend too much time, researching something. And I think that's just like anything, like drinking water. You can die from it if you drink too much, right? There's always a balance, right? So I think as long as the balance is with the right intention and you're not going overboard, I think it's important to inform yourself about health and treatment and not being afraid to be that guy researching on their own to figure out their own treatment, and then qualifying that with an actual doctor and making that informed decision together on the path of treatment.
So much wisdom right there, Henry. I made a conscious decision to say, hey, if somebody has self-diagnosed themselves with something, then, we may have a more detailed conversation even before agreeing to be on the podcast. But I love what you said there, right? There's nothing wrong with going to the internet and researching. It's like, hey, these are my symptoms. And as we know, right? If you say you've got the sniffles or you've got a sore throat, it could be allergies, a common cold, or you will not survive the next 24 hours, right? You can get a vast range of results, but that's where some common sense comes in as well. And taking that to your doctor and saying, hey, I am not feeling as my normal. My normal has changed, or my normal is different. What is going on? And I love that you went to that walk-in clinic who sounds like they're now your doctor and they referred you to an ENT. So you just didn't stop there. You just continued on to say, okay, that ENT was like a note. And then you continued on. And so, how did that feel to get that ENT to say, yeah, let's go ahead. Let's go do this?
I think, it was a huge sense of relief that there was an ENT who first recognized a problem because it is a very unknown problem, unknown syndrome. Even to ENTs, it's kind of crazy. And them saying, yes, there's an end to this painful thing you have, and there's treatment for it. And then I just remember like who's excited for surgery? Nobody is, right? And for myself, them having to kind of open up my mouth and put me to sleep, and not a big surgery, but just big needle down. I'm afraid of needles. I've never been so excited to get a shot, and it was a big one too, and it just felt great. And then I woke up from my sleep and I could it hurt, right? My throat hurt, and after the big needle they shoved down my throat, and I just remember feeling pain for 2 weeks, but I just constantly remind myself this is totally worth it, right? And of course, as the weeks gone by, the swelling subsided. The feeling of this relaxed throat, it was just amazing. It just blew my mind away. And there was all these other downstream positive impacts from getting this shot too. I've noticed that, and I didn't notice before until I got the shot, because my ears and my nose and my mouth are all connected, right? And when you have one part that's closed off all the time, you create this cavity of air in your head, right? That you just don't know, right? And when I'm running, I always hear my footsteps, and you can hear this kind of fishbowl sound. I just assumed my whole life it was normal, but the moment my throat opened up, that fishbowl sound went away. So I don't hear my steps when I jog anymore as loud. That was a huge difference because I was always bothered by it. I always thought it was just normal, but it turned out that it was related to having this tense muscle here, right? Using AirPods too, right? When you plug your ears and you're closing off one, exit of air, and then your throat's tight. So when I'm talking with AirPods, I could never use them to have a conversation because I felt like I was talking to myself. I can hear the echo. But again, once they relieve that pressure or that tenseness, I no longer have that problem. So it's fun. Like what I'm trying to get at is like, you'd be surprised. Like treatments, like yeah, you'll treat that primary kind of condition you have, but the downstream impact to positive things that can happen in your life from just one illness going, one condition going away can spur off all this happiness in life that you just never expected, right? So I go and say like, hey, like don't be afraid to go to a doctor. Don't be afraid to research about what potential illness you have, and again, within reason, don't go overboard, because it's totally worth it in the end. Totally worth it. Your quality of life will improve. I can go jog with my AirPods on now without feeling that pain in my ear. Like who would have thought, right? So yeah, it's just been really really great. Just kind of saying no to all the other people telling me don't do this, don't do this. I'm so happy I didn't listen, and just kept going, and it just felt great afterwards. The results.
I had a doctor on the podcast early on, and practices a very different type of medicine, but what she said will always stick with me. And she said, if you are getting something back from your doctor and it's just not sitting well with you, or you're just like, I think we need a second opinion here. She said, if your doctor's confident in their diagnosis, they're not going to be upset with a second opinion. And so I know it doesn't sound like your doctor was upset with a second opinion and things like that, but you got a second and third and fourth opinion. And so I think that's a good lesson and something for somebody to take away is, if your doctor is going, why don't you just believe my diagnosis? Maybe they're not confident. I'm not trying to put doctors down here, but if somebody wants to even review the work that I'm working on, I work for a couple of people, I contract to a few people. If they say, hey, Tim, I want to see your timesheet, I have nothing to hide. Go for it. If I had something to hide, I'd be nervous about it. I wouldn't be confident in that. And so I think the point is, if something is just not sitting well with you, get that other diagnosis or get that second opinion. The thing is doctors, I believe, and another doctor came on, a different doctor was on the podcast, is doctors see so many patients, like GPs, general practitioners, see so many patients. There's so many conditions, and trying to know a lot about a lot. And so asking for that referral, getting that referral to that specialist is so important to advocate for. And here you are, your neck is opened up. It's looking extra toned. I don't know if that's from, the sun or from the Botox or what, but, how was it? You're a father. Do you and your kids now have burping competitions?
My old younger son loves to burp. By the way, this is hereditary. This no burping thing. So my older son can't burp. We just
Oh,
discovered that
okay.
through my journey. So my 9-year-old, and then my 7-year-old can burp at will, just like my wife. And funny you say that. We actually do have burping contests, and he would always put down my burp, saying it wasn't that loud, and then he would show me what a loud burp is, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty loud. So and then my response to him, hey, I'm new to this. I'm still learning how to burp again. But no, every time I have a big burp, it's like, yes, it feels great. Take that, son.
I love it. So your oldest son isn't able to burp, and so I'm curious, have you gone into looking like what age is a good age for treatment, or what? How are you navigating that with him?
Yeah. So I've asked him this question several times. Like, are you feeling any pain not being able to burp? Does it impact you in any way? He hasn't, and I remember this when I was young too. Not being able to burp never really affected my life as a youngling, right? As a young child, I think at one point, probably in my teenage years, that's when it started becoming more painful and more noticeable and more impacting my regular day to day life. So I think the thing for me is just constant, just monitoring, like, just ask ever so often, hey, how's your tummy feeling? How's the inability to burp not feeling to you? Is it bothering you? And the moment it starts bothering, I think it's time to consider treatment, because treatment at the end of the day, it's all about quality of life and improving life. We don't want to inject any medication for no reason that doesn't belong in the body, right? So I think it's just going to be one of those things where we just feel it out. Once it starts bothering him, we consider it for sure.
I love that approach, right? You just don't want to jump to a solution when his quality of life seems to be fine. It seems to be okay right now, and so I want to jump back to something you said that's kind of just popped back in my mind. And you and your wife, your family were over for brunch, and we had a fun conversation just around the best quality of sleep. And this is way off topic. And so, what did that feel like? I think it was your first time going under, right? Just getting the
Oh
medicine
yeah.
in and counting down. What did it feel like for you?
Well, for me, it was like I had like the worst sleep the night before because when I'm excited about something, I just can't sleep. And I was excited to get, this treatment. So I was kind of like, oh, okay, still up late at night, just thinking about it. Got to the OR room, and I'm like, I'm ready for this, right? And then the doctor's like, oh, you're just gonna fall. You're gonna try to stay awake, and you're just gonna fall asleep, and you before you know it, you're just gonna wake up and you feel rested. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna be that guy who will stay up, and I'm gonna fight it, right? And I literally was fighting it as hard as I can as they were administering the anesthesia, and I just couldn't do, and I just remembered fighting it, and that's all I remembered. And then I woke up, and that was it. And I remember walking out like, wow, this feels good. I feel like we're so rested. And for any parents out there who have kids, you'll know what I mean. Like getting a good sleep, like throughout the night is like the best thing that could ever happen, right? And I had one of those, and it felt great.
So well rested, after the swelling went down, you had your first burp. I love your story. Like your story, just it's it's unusual and hopeful. I'm leaving here. Just I know I got to message somebody about, hey, ha, have a listen to Henry, um, because his story of advocacy is one that it's not just inspiring, Henry. It's unusual because many of us would stop at that first or second of like, I guess this is as good as it gets, but you kept pushing. So I love that determination. We should have planned this a little differently where, hey, we crack a beer and it's like, let's drink and see who burps first. But, maybe we'll save that for another day. But,
For sure.
as we look to kind of wind down your story, for those who are listening, many of us live with an invisible condition or an invisible disability. How are we going to end the stigma? Because your story is maybe a little bit different, where you were surrounded by friends who supported you. I have heard from many, many people who are surrounded by people who make fun of or don't understand or question. So there's so much stigma that surrounds invisible disabilities. And how are we going to end this? How are we going to work towards a society where, if our kids need support, that they're not afraid to ask?
That's an amazing question, and I think one kind of recommendation is like, I think the main thing is don't is to always feel like it's okay to be different. And when I say different, it's like we can be all different from the way we look or the way we talk or the way we think, but also our health conditions too. Not everybody's going to be the same. I think a lot of folks are afraid of sharing their condition to others, and that's fine, right? Totally cool. Like when I found out about my no burping syndrome, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of funny. I mean, I'll just share it to my friends, and people just laugh about it. But at the same time, it's like it is funny. It's unusual. But at the end of the day, it's like you got to be very brave in terms of just not allowing people to say no to what you believe in and what you feel, right? And listen to your body. If it doesn't feel right, like research about it, right? And when you research about it, be very open-minded, but also question what you see online, because not everything is real, right? Find really good sources, right? I didn't go out and go to like doctors, cooldoctors.com or anything. I went to like I read research papers from Yale Medicine, Columbia, and really tried to identify, is this something potentially it could be what I have, and something that I can bring to the doctor and have a conversation about. Right, be prepared to have a conversation, bring facts with you, not just like, oh, I saw this person on this message board who said this. Bring some good facts, right? and deliberate, right? And good doctors will listen to it and be like, yes, you have a very good point of view in this. Let's dive deeper into this together and figure out what the source of the problem is and validate what you've read. And some doctors will be like, no, just you can't do anything about it, right? And well, what I would say to those doctors, if I am bringing good facts in, um, is like I don't want to settle with no, right? I want to settle this syndrome and figure this out because it's not your body, right? It's my body, right? So yeah, just be brave. Just know that it's normal to be different from everybody else. Everybody has different bodies. Everybody has different conditions, and don't feel bad about it or guilty about it. And just seek help and be prepared and be research and come with data and be open minded with your conversations with your doctor and figure it out together. And sometimes it will require multiple opinions, and that's okay too, right? And ultimately, I think everybody, if they kind of follow that mental model, they're going to figure out what's really holding them back, and then from there you find a solution. That's it.
Oh, I love that. It's summarized in, know what matters most to you, research, come prepared. Just like in the workplace, if you bring a problem to your manager without a potential solution, your manager is going to go, okay, now I have something to figure this out. But even with your doctor, bring in facts, bring in some studies, come prepared. And even from past and podcast episodes with doctors, that they appreciate that. And keep pushing, keep advocating for yourself. I love it. And Henry, thank you for coming on, sharing your rare condition with us, R-CPD. I'm gonna have all the notes or all the links in the show notes as well, just because I still don't know much about this, and I know yourself, and now your son potentially has this condition as well. You said it well. The best thing we can do is educate ourselves, not just on the conditions we live with, but if our friends and family are sharing conditions that they live with, take the time, research it, spend a bit of time. It takes 10 minutes, read a little bit, have a better understanding, because that's how we're going to continue to strive to end the stigma. So, Henry, thank you so much for coming on, and we got to get our families together again soon.
Love it. We'll go out for beers and we'll have a burping contest.
Oh, I love it. Let's do it. Yeah. We may or may not record that. Probably not, but we're going to have some fun doing it. And for those who are tuning in, thanks for listening and thanks for all your support. What helps Invisible Condition grow is by liking, subscribing, but most importantly, sharing out the episodes. Share this with your friends and family. You never know. Maybe somebody's living with R-CPD. You might not know and might not ever know. So share this episode out. And if you have the financial means, maybe consider dropping a donation. That everything that we pull in or I pull in goes directly into supporting the publication of this episode and future episodes. So with that, I appreciate you, Henry, for coming on, and I hope you have an amazing day.
Thanks, Tim. It was my pleasure, and thank you for having me here. I hope to. Well, hopefully, I don't have another condition to be on here, but no, I'm glad we had this chat.
I hope you don't have another condition, but if you do, you know where you can share it. And yeah, have a good one, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Tim.